Wow, that was something. I'm still short of breath after that FIFA World Cup final, and it has been more than 72 hours since it got concluded. Hello, and welcome to the Express Sports Pod. This is Game Time. I am Rahul Pandey, and today, as you got by that little bit of a hint that I just gave you, we are going to talk about the FIFA World Cup final that was, and the FIFA World Cup that was. Probably once in a lifetime final. And I'm not just talking about World Cup finals, I'm also talking about all the football finals that I've seen so far. This perhaps got me bawling like anything. And not just because I wanted to see that ending that was, but also because of the cast and whatever they did throughout the match. I have with me, as usual, my co-host Mihir Vasavda, and we are going to try and wrap up all that happened in that final and all that possibly happened in the World Cup in this 30 minutes or so segment. Hello, Mihir. Welcome. And yeah, on to the heavy lifting that was this World Cup.
Thanks, Rahul. कहाँ से शुरुआत करें हम? You've mentioned कि 72 hours हो गए. 72 hours at the time of recording this podcast, we must clarify. And you're right, yaar. I mean, I don't think there has been a World Cup final like this. Just for a recap, Argentina were declared the world champions in case any of our listeners were living under a rock. पिछले एक हफ्ते में they went up twice in that match. 2-0, France made it 2-2. Then extra time with Argentina went ahead 3-2. France made it 3-3. It looked like Messi's dream of winning the World Cup would just remain a dream. But then यार वहीं पर एक destiny का हो या जो भी कह दो, it was just written in the stars and it just happened that way. It had to be. I mean, it's incredible कि the range of emotions जो Argentina में लेकर गए during this World Cup, right? Right from the opening match defeat to Saudi Arabia, where you thought कि यार खत्म, ये टीम के कुछ hopes नहीं रख सकते. It will just end like the last time. That's in 2018. Then they just, we'll of course talk about it in detail, but the kind of changes that they made and the open-mindedness they showed, it has led to them winning the World Cup for the first time after 36 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, आपने mentioned किया about this fairy tale of an ending. We've been talking about this for some days, and I think we'll be talking about this for the rest of our lives probably, because this doesn't happen in sport, does it? Fairy tale endings, कितने ही players को मिली होंगी. And even before the final kicked off, that just one line from Messi, this will be my final World Cup match. It couldn't have been more perfect. Final World Cup match, a World Cup final, the only match ever that he has wanted to win so badly. And he gets it. That second goal he scores in the match, right? Possibly one of the ugliest goals Lionel Messi has scored in his career, but possibly the most important ones. That penalty he took, it was just so slow. It went past Hugo Lloris so slowly. He had time to make up for the wrong judgment that he did by going to his left, come up to the right, and still wasn't able to save that. So yeah, written in the stars. But I think as far as Messi is concerned, he did come up as this leader that everyone wanted him to be in Argentina in this tournament, right? I mean, वो Saudi Arabia वाले match की बात करें, उसके बाद he was the one who stood up in the bus, as per Clarin, an Argentine newspaper, that this is an opportunity for us to rise up and show what this team is made of. And I think that's just one of the Messi captain moments that happened during this tournament. And it was really essential for Argentina that it did happen this time around, because 36 years was just too long a wait for them to lift the World Cup.
Absolutely. And the only parallel actually, जो राहुल मुझे इसमें जो लग रही है, वो, maybe it's a stretch, but in my head it fits perfectly, is Sachin Tendulkar lifting the World Cup in 2011, right? That entire World Cup, I remember I used to work for the DNA newspaper back then, and we'd come up with, now looking back, it kind of looks lame, but we'd come up this catchphrase for the World Cup that this time for Sachin, this time for Tendulkar. It was right on the back of this time for Africa. So that was the link back then. And it just was something similar. The entire nation, you could feel, was rooting for Tendulkar. That World Cup wasn't about whether India will win or not. It was about whether Sachin will win the World Cup or not. And it was pretty much very similar. No one cared about whether France would win the World Cup, whether Argentina would win the World Cup. It was only whether Messi would win the World Cup. And you mentioned a very important point about Messi showing the leadership. जो आपने कहा कि after the Saudi match उसने बस में जाके speech दी. But I mean, his on-field leadership is always there. Off-field, of course, it's something with Argentina that he's developed because of his love-hate relationship with the national team. But Rahul, yeah, the other things, right, that Messi did. I mean, channeling his inner Diego, for example, Diego Maradona. I mean, Que Mira Bobo perhaps becomes the catchphrase of this World Cup. It was a very wimpy fight back, a wimpy way to show his frustration in a way. But yeah, he showed that aggression. And that was missing from Messi and his Argentina performances.
True, yeah. मतलब वो Netherlands वाला match, I keep revisiting a couple of videos. First, of course, is his reaction to scoring that penalty. So Noppert, the Dutch goalkeeper, had said in the build-up to the match that, I can, and it was very valid of him to say that I can save penalties, which is plural, up against Messi. And he had the opportunity to stand up in goal twice in that match. Both times Messi, of course, beat him, but the first time he did, he came up with that signature Riquelme celebration in front of Van Gaal. That's another story we can discuss in another pod probably. Then, of course, is the moment where these players are just at it. Everyone's fighting, everyone's 17 yellow cards in the match. And जैसे ही वो जो full time whistle बजी थी, when it was just 2-2 towards the end of it, Messi is just seen fuming towards the ref, who is someone, if La Liga fans will remember, the ref who was there in the quarterfinal is someone of a certain reputation in Lionel Messi's eyes. So as he was progressing towards the ref, Virgil van Dijk, and I think there was just another Dutch player is seen trying to calm him down, but Messi just shakes his arm, takes their hands off in the path towards the ref. He's just so furious in that particular match, or I think it was almost a catharsis for him because so much has been said about him in Argentina over the years. Diego Maradona, even before his first World Cup appearance, Messi's first World Cup appearance, had said that this is the man who's going to replace me. So there was a huge build-up as far as his international career was concerned, and just transcended into this world title, which is a great thing for him and for Argentina.
It is. And of course, we shouldn't. Messi was the central figure in everything that Argentina did. But yeah, the support cast that he had was incredible. I mean, my hats off to, first of all, the other Lionel in the Argentina setup, Lionel Scaloni, the coach. It was incredible. He showed the ability to make tactical changes every match. जो एक हमेशा coaches, they get stuck in this rut कि वो पहले से ही जो एक pattern, एक system जो सोच कर आते हैं, they stick to it no matter what during the World Cup, even if it means कि they will not win it. In Scaloni, Argentina found a coach जिसने, I think, almost every match until the semi-final and the final, they were the only exceptions, where he changed the system, changed his players. He was trying to find the best combination, which he did. And he found that with a 4-4-2, which he used in the semi-final and the final. Of course, it helped that Messi was the free man roaming and Julian Alvarez was a perfect foil for him in a way. So it worked out beautifully for them. And Alvarez was outstanding. There was McAllister, who was wonderful throughout this competition. His father played with Maradona, son winning, McAllister himself winning the World Cup with Messi. And the goalkeeper, Emiliano Martinez. Where do we even begin to talk about him, yaar?
I think there's an R-rated version of this conversation, which everyone can have about Emiliano Martinez, which we are not going to have on this pod because I think probably everyone understands what we are trying to say. But
no, we can just tell our listeners, whoever hasn't really seen that video, they really should. Just
if you watch him during the penalties, both in the Netherlands match as well as in the finals, there is this figure of a true devil. As far as Emiliano Martinez is concerned, anyone going up to take a penalty against him is not going to be a favorite. Even with Kylian Mbappe, even though he had scored penalty twice from the spot in that final, there was almost this sense of, is he going to do this or is Emi going to save this? He got his fingertips onto it, almost saved that. But yeah, what struck me most about this Argentine team is that they were probably the second group that cared so much about family after Vin Diesel and the cast of Fast and Furious. Because the way they just created that atmosphere in their camp, Qatar University wasn't the most lush or the most luxurious of the camps of all the World Cup teams at the tournament. And yet they had this evening barbecue sesh, which they used to have almost every day. Imported, what, 2,600 kgs of beef from home. And then over barbecue, they used to just gel together. So even though they had someone like a Messi, who was not just a messianic figure, pun intended for them, but also this brother, who they quoted as brother in many of their interviews, they also had other things to bond them up. Say about Lionel Scaloni, when Messi was sent off in his debut in 2005, I think, international debut, just seconds into his international debut, Scaloni was there fighting for him as a player. That's the history they go back to. Pablo Aimar, who was his assistant, was one of the idols for Messi growing up. And these guys were there when it came to Messi's last dance. So all these things kind of really gelled well together for Argentina to win the World Cup.
Yeah, and we can go on and on about this. I mean, what struck me as much as the performances on field was the reaction back home in Argentina. I mean, the country is going through a difficult phase, to put it very mildly. You know, inflation, they're saying, is going to touch around 100%. It's around 90 right now. Politically, the country is in a mess. Financially, it's in doldrums. And फिर भी the fact कि Argentina was one of the most supported side in Qatar, and we're talking about not just in terms of expats, it was about people from all parts of Argentina taking flights, taking expensive flights, and then traveling to Qatar, जहाँ पर rates were sky high for everything from food to stay to, I mean, whatever you can think of. In times of recession, the fact that people found it important कि हम हमारे सेविंग्स को थोड़ा सा ब्रेक करके अर्जेंटीना को सपोर्ट करने जाए कतर, दैट शोज कि फुटबॉल कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है फॉर दैट कंट्री. Of course, it's a source of national pride क्योंकि I can't think of any other Argentine figure जो globally इतना appealing रहा है. I mean, the two biggest global stars have been both footballers, Maradona first and now Messi. So of course that's the national pride bit. And yeah, the celebrations we saw in the city square in Buenos Aires, incredible scenes. I can't think of anything else. The drone shots that we've seen, it's, you just feel happy that Argentina won, even though they were the most, perhaps the ugliest team to watch. They always had 8 people defending and then Messi doing just Messi things and उन्हें बचाता था. So in that sense, they might not be the most prettiest champions to have been around. But then so were like Spain were very boring. Spain passed the ball, the tiki-taka thing was there, but they were also boring to watch. So, well, who the hell are we to talk about that? Perhaps Brazil and France were the prettiest champions. But then look what happened to both those sides. I mean, Brazil, for all their flash and style, they got knocked out. And France, credit to them for being there and thereabouts always in the last 30 years. So, incredible stories, Rahul. Beef, yeah, that is Argentina's biggest source of strength, isn't it?
True. And we're not just talking about beef to eat, but also, beef in the more fighting sense, which they did when it came to Netherlands. I think players proactively searched for more beefs throughout the match so that they can channel their
Even France,
inner energy. Yeah, definitely. Even after the match. I mean, we're watching these visuals of Emi Martinez still clinging on to the Kylian Mbappe doll or toy or whatever that was. That's ugly to watch, but I think, only an Argentine fan can understand it. But yeah, moving on, I think you've touched on a particular word that we need to talk about, which is nationality. I mean, going into this World Cup, the lead up to this World Cup was almost like all of the West trying to question, is Qatar the right host to do this? With their human rights track record, with all that had been said in the build up to the tournament, you, of course, did this brilliant reportage of migrant laborers from India and what fate did they suffer in the build up to this tournament. But Mihir, after the World Cup, how can we see this storyline moving forward? I mean, is this a tournament that has helped Qatar in any way whatsoever?
So there are multiple ways to look at it. Was this World Cup a success? Of course it was. It was the greatest final ever played. We saw some incredible results. The football was really outstanding. It helped that it was held in the middle of season so that the players were in peak fitness. All those things were great. But it's also important to understand that the football wasn't great because it was held in Qatar. It could have been held in India, but still it would have been great. So Qatar has nothing to do with that. People say Qatar's hospitality was great. And all those reports of human rights and migrant workers' deaths and I mean, when people reached there, they said that, oh, we didn't see anything like that. But again, I don't understand what were they expecting. They weren't really expecting Qatar ki वो लोग tourism दिखाएंगे कि हमारा वहाँ पर कैसे होते हैं migrant workers का condition. So, I mean, of course, the criticism that Qatar faced was harsh. It was extremely harsh in some ways, especially in human rights. It was deserved, perhaps. There is no defense of a life lost while constructing a stadium. Other issues, like I mentioned in that piece, I mean, no country is in a position to lecture another country for ethics and human rights and all those things. But yeah, I think sport going forward is going to be confronted with all these issues क्योंकि ये increase ही होने वाला है यार. I mean, the money is in the Middle East. So you'll see Middle Eastern countries coming up more and more to host this big event. And it's not a bad idea. I mean, look, sport has been very Eurocentric, the way it's run, the way it's played, everything. So this World Cup, the biggest positive to come out of it is that it's broken some shackles in that respect.
Two things come to my mind immediately. One is, of course, the power of sport, right? There's this visual from after the final where Kylian Mbappe is just has really no way to go along from the moment that he has just suffered, from the fate his team has just suffered, is dejected, and then Emmanuel Macron comes along and tries to console him. The moment of fury that was unleashed by French fans alone on Macron post that, you get to see this picture of the power that Mbappe holds, even over the most supreme politician in the country. And you get to see the power that the sport holds. I mean, look at the number of people that were rooting for Messi to lift the World Cup. This power that scares me almost at times, that these athletes have over important political figures. And when it comes to how sports is going to tap into it, that's really going to be an important sphere in our near future. Also, USA, Canada, Mexico are going to host the World Cup in 2026. Now, you said no country is in position to lecture another, and it's really right, because these countries are obviously going to have their own issues, which won't go neglected now that the world media has found this space that was Qatar 2022. Do you really think there's any country right now which is in position to host a tournament, given the number of issues that are being talked about at these world events and the countries that are hosting them?
I won't look at it like that, yaar. I mean, कोई भी country clean नहीं है, right? So it's up to the international federations to ensure कि at least human rights के मामले में they should be ensuring कि their flagship tournaments they represent a modern world, they represent a changing world. हम इंडिया में बैठ के ये नहीं कह सकते कि कतर को क्यों वर्ल्ड कप मिल रहा है, कतर बैठ के ये नहीं कह सकते कि यूएस में क्या हो रहा है देखो, एंड यूएस वाले नहीं कह सकते कि वाई शुड इट गो टू मिडल ईस्ट, because every country has its own history, its own present, and the road it's taking for the future. Should sport and these issues be combined? Well, they shouldn't be ideally. But again, we are living in this world जहाँ पर everything is so interlinked. I mean, it can't work both ways, right? If the Western world does not want the Middle East to host certain big events, then the Western world shouldn't also be accepting the money that's pouring into their own leagues coming in from the Middle Eastern countries like PSG and Manchester City. There's so many clubs that are being run by nation states. So आप कह रहे हो कि वो ठीक है बट हम वहाँ जाके नहीं खेलेंगे, तो वो तो वैसे तो नहीं चलेगा. And yeah, look, I mean, USA, Mexico, Canada, it will be a great World Cup. Saudi Arabia is looking to host the 2030 World Cup, and the question isn't going to be whether these countries should hold it या नहीं. The question actually will be कि किस तरह के dilemma will we as spectators or players will face. I mean, look at Messi, for example. He is the brand ambassador for Saudi Arabia right now. So he will be campaigning against Argentina, who are also looking to bid for the 2030 World Cup. So that's an awkward situation that players will find themselves in. And that's a bigger, deeper problem right now.
True. And I can almost visualize that trailer of the 2030 World Cup, if at all Saudi Arabia hosts it. That's, of course, going to comprise of the footage from the first match of the 2022 World Cup, where Saudi Arabia defeated Argentina. And Messi having to do something with that trailer would be just immense for that state. But at the same time, as a fan of the sport, I think obviously have a little bit of bias when it comes to Uruguay hosting the 2030 World Cup. It's the centennial issue, and I think it just needs to go back to South America at a certain point of time. So yeah, I think we'll see. We'll find that out in not so long a time from now. But yeah, I think this has been fascinating chat. Parting thoughts from the tournament, Mihir, when it comes to maybe teams from Asia and Africa?
Africa was interesting. I think Morocco were the most heartwarming storyline of this World Cup. Asia, of course, had a great World Cup, even though they didn't like go on to get their best ever performances. But say in Japan and South Korea, Japan especially were incredible to beat Germany, Spain, and nearly beat Croatia as well in the way they did. It shows that they're headed in the right direction. I really feel that we spoke about the Eurocentrism of sport, and this feels like the perfect time to increase the number of teams in the World Cup. I mean, there was a lot of pushback from Europe about that when FIFA decided that 2026 mein we'll have 48 teams instead of 32. But now it seems like a great move because Asia and Africa will be the two continents benefiting most from it in terms of the quotas that they'll get. So what will happen eventually is we saw in this World Cup that the gap between the haves and the have nots in world football is decreasing. It'll only shrink further by the time 26 comes or 30 comes. It's great news in that sense, and I'm really looking forward to it. The only thing that FIFA has to find out the best solution for that is how the group stage will be played out in 26, because with 48 teams you perhaps will have a different format compared to what it was now. And we've seen the kind of drama this current format provides, where the top two teams progress to the round of 16. There is a proper element of एक जो casualty वाला एक element है that remains, and that has to be retained. So that's one thing that FIFA needs to sort out, but it's a perfect time to have an expanded World Cup. What was the moment for you, Rahul?
I think just those couple of minutes when in Group E, there was a moment that Japan and Costa Rica were going through and Germany and Spain were going out. I think those couple of minutes rocked my World Cup. And you're right. I would not want FIFA to tamper in any way, shapes, or form the simultaneous matches on round three, as far as the group stage is concerned. That provides the ideal way to consume the sport. I think that's the peak as far as World Cup group stage is concerned. So I really hope they don't tamper with it. We have our producer Shashank also with us, who I would like to ask what was his moment of the tournament.
Wait, I know what will that be?
Oh yeah.
Him not watching Saudi Arabia beat Argentina. That's his moment of the World Cup.
That's what Mihir keeps repeating.
Of course I will keep repeating.
Yeah, but no, I mean it was the final. You guys know I don't watch that much football or any other sport for that matter. But despite the fact that it didn't have the context that probably you guys have, but I just tuned in and I was hooked. It was an insane match. Like I started when Argentina had already scored a goal, and so I think that was the first was the penalty shootout, right?
Penalty.
Yeah, it was a penalty, not penalty shootout. Yeah, it was a penalty that was scored, and then like I don't know what happened to me in that moment. I was a football fan. You know what I mean? Like in that moment, I was like, I am all in, and I don't know how that happened.
And I was watching that match at my brother's wedding reception, my first cousin's wedding reception, and अंदर संगीत चल रहा था, डांस चल रहा था, and I found a cozy corner in that thing जहाँ पर मैं मेरे mom के phone पे I was watching the match, and on my phone I was doing some things for work, and I could see like every 2 minutes, 5 minutes, people used to just drop by, and then it reached a stage जहाँ पर मेरे एक फ़ोन के सराउंडिंग 15 लोग खड़े हुए हैं and अंदर कुछ अलग ही फंक्शन चल रहा है, and by the time it reached penalty, the lobby of the hotel had some 3 groups sitting where everyone was watching the match on their phones, and of course the wedding reception went on beautifully. So I mean that was of course there, but this match was something that everyone literally spoke about that evening.
Yeah. And again, there were some moments that I couldn't believe that I was noticing those things because I don't watch football regularly. But for example, in the final penalty shootout, the goal that Messi scored, like I was like, how does he have that confidence that, I'm not even going to lift the ball. I'm just going to, it's going to remain on the ground and it's still going to be a goal.
Incredible.
I was very blown away by that.
Incredible. And what's more incredible are these two stories of someone who wasn't that equated to watching football the way he did, and someone who was in the middle of his brother's reception, even though he's a big football fan, trying to rope in 15 other people to watch that match alongside him. I think that's why Gianni Infantino in his next press conference is going to say, "Today I feel rich." Thank you so much, gents. I think this has been a wonderful World Cup, post-World Cup pod. Thank you so much, Mihir. Thank you so much, Shashank. And thanks to all of you who have been tuning in at this World Cup. You know that the end of this World Cup only brings us closer to our next sports story, which we are going to come up with next week. So yeah, stay tuned and keep watching sports.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.